Hey there everyone, Afrodo Reviews here, helping you decide, is that book worth reading over second breakfast? Or does it deserve the fiery pits of Mount Doom? So let's decide. Today's book is Frozen.
Let it go, let it go.
No, not that one. Shh. Frozen is a young adult novel published on September 17, 2013 by authors Melissa de la Cruz and Michael Johnston. The authors have a long bibliography behind them before they wrote this book. Responsible for the Blue Blood series. No, not that one. And the Witches of East End series. There isn't much else in terms of trivia, at least not so far as the book itself goes, so I'm just going to go ahead and move on, granting you the report card. And then officially moving on to the cover. Now the cover of this book is not good at all. It's one of those cheap cop-out covers where who I guess is supposed to be our main female protagonist, Nat, is floating in water. There's the ice blue background and the filter that definitely gives off a cold vibe, but I mean other than that, nothing about this cover has anything to do with the book. I mean, looking at it, you would be forgiven for thinking it's more of an adult book that deals with mature themes, the head above water meant to symbolize our main character, threatening to be overwhelmed with whatever the titular Frozen is referring to. But no, this is just a YA post-apocalyptic novel with fantasy elements. So let's go ahead and discuss the synopsis. The synopsis, as presented on the cover, is: Welcome to New Vegas, a city once covered in bling, now blanketed in ice. Like much of the destroyed planet, the place knows only one temperature: freezing. But some things never change. The diamond in the ice desert is still a 24-hour hedonistic playground, and nothing keeps the crowds away from the casino floors. Never mind the rumors about the sinister sorcery lurking in the shadows. At the heart of the city is Natasha Kestel, a young blackjack dealer looking for a way out. Like many, she's heard of the mythical land called the Blue. They say it's a paradise, where the sun still shines and the waters are turquoise. More importantly, it's a place where Nat won't be persecuted, even if her darkest secret comes to light. But passage to the Blue is treacherous, if not impossible. Nat's only shot is to bet on a ragtag crew of mercenaries led by a cocky runner named Ryan Wesson. Danger and deceit await around every corner, even as Nat and Wes find themselves inexorably drawn to each other. But can true love survive the lies? Fiery hearts collide in this tale of evil some men do, and the awesome power within us all. Disclaimer, only if you can ride a dragon apparently, but let's move on from there. Let's not quite get into the review yet, because truth be told, that's not an adequate summation of the book. Admittedly, it's more of a death by a thousand cuts rather than anything in regards to it being a serious hit to what it is about. As you can tell, though, it's going to be a book a lot like Arctic Code, but unfortunately bereft of the amount of imagination and thought that went behind the other book. But alas, let's get to the review. And the biggest criticism I have for this book, it has no idea what it wants to be. Honestly and sincerely, that's the biggest issue I had with most of this book. This book just felt like it was seriously confused on just what it wanted to do, what it wanted to be. Everything from themes, tone, character, and even the setting itself felt like the author had one thing in mind at first, but then switched to something else halfway through, before falling back and then just going a third route. For example, the most obvious of which, the setting. The idea of a post-apocalyptic world where everything has suddenly reached sub-zero temperatures to the point that places such as Las Vegas, once deserts with massively high temperatures, are now a tundra. And a strange occurrence that is happening where certain people are being born with strange powers is in itself a good enough idea on its own. But then Cruz and Johnston just kept throwing ideas in. Like after we get out of Vegas, all of a sudden we're in a climate change based post-apocalypse. Like imagine WALL-E but with a blue filter slapped over it and some ice sprinkled about. And you think, oh okay, so this is a climate based ice age. Only randomly partway through it's revealed that hobbits, elves, and dark elves just also suddenly appeared, though that's not what the book calls them. But they're basically hobbits, elves, and dark elves. I mean, it's small men, Sylvan, and Drow. And they may spell Drow, D-R-A-U, but that doesn't suddenly mean it's not the same drow as Drow. But with their introduction comes the heavily implications that it was actually a fantasy element that caused the apocalypses and not climate change. And all that trash that our characters are going through for a good portion of the book, actually for most of the book, is completely coincidental to what's happening. And that would be fine if they felt more relevant to the setting. But for the most part, the Sylvan and Halflings are basically non-entities until halfway through, where the book suddenly just throws a group of them to join our main cast. And we never actually even see a drow, just aspects of their aesthetic that humans appropriate for themselves. Ironically, those humans being slavers. Again, it's not stretching to say they're just dark elves. And even the initial apocalypse, what caused it all, is still confused. Because, oh, it was a big freeze. Oh, but wait a minute, there was also a giant flood. But also, don't forget there was a bunch of world-ending wars. Oh, but don't worry, the government also took over and became a totalitarian and evil. It honestly felt like they couldn't make up their mind of where they were going with it, so they just threw everything in. And trust me, the setting itself, even beyond that, doesn't make sense. There are no scientists or books anymore somehow, because apparently people just stopped wanting to learn things. Like, honestly, the little stupidest thing that this book wants me to believe about the world is we somehow dropped all forms of written language to adopt Textlish. Textlish. You heard me. Somehow this will drop everything to adopt the modern hieroglyphics. Or not really. Because we're given one example of a book that's written entirely in Textlish, and it uses the... I don't know what the symbol is called other than greater than, less than, so this symbol and a 3 to make a heart. And that's the only symbol it uses in there. Otherwise, it's text speech from like the early 2000s text speech too. So, and I swear to God, if I ever see someone write a book in all Textlish, I will literally join the book burners on this one. Honestly, the world building is bad even with the smaller stuff that the author just includes, because it doesn't make any sense when put in the wider perspective. For example, there's a part where the authors mention that water is rather sparse in a frozen wasteland, where it's almost constantly snowing. What does Cruz and Johnston think snow is made of? But there is one scene... there's one scene where they talk about how plants and vegetation are so incredibly sparse, and only this one specific place called Zion has the ability to grow food, with something like ice flowers being so rare that our characters stop and marvel at it, only for our characters to also eat their dinner with cheap wooden chopsticks. Question: if it's so cold that vegetation is dying off, why are they wasting precious wood on cheap chopsticks that are apparently still garbage and do the wishbone thing? The world can't read, and emojis are apparently the way everyone communicates now, with Nat being rare in that not only can she read, but she likes to. But the plot-important map is also named the Anaximander map, after the pre-Socratic Greek philosopher that was supposedly the first to map the ocean. And that's what everyone calls it. And it's like, that's not a casual name to just drop on somebody. Like, most people would call it the blue map or the paradise map or something like that. They're not going to go deep into something that, if you just have a casual understanding of Greek history, you probably don't know who that is. You see how none of this makes sense when you think about it for more than a few seconds. But I think, honestly, one of the worst things about this might be why it does that. I mean, like I said, it's a young adult book. And it aggressively wants to tell this adult, mature story, but it doesn't want to leave that young adult mold. Because somehow one of the most feared, notorious slavers on the planet is 19 years old. And Wes, our veteran who's been scarred by his years of service, but has developed a sense of world wise that helps save some time and again, is also 19 years old. It's like they did all this stuff to try to appeal to young adults, but didn't want to make a good story around it to keep them around. You know what I mean? They were hoping purely pandering was gonna make them better. Let's go to my next point. The characters aren't great either, and also suffer a lot from this confusion. For example, Wes, again, is supposed to be this hard, tough smuggler who's cocky and dangerous, but he's also one of the most idiotic, spineless, and soft-hearted people around. Like, somehow, the story expects me to believe that he would consider selling out Nat in the beginning, stealing her money, and then basically handing over to slavers or the government to earn favor. Like, he sits there and thinks about it but decides not to. But then at the same time, it's showing me that there's the same type of man who can't bear to kill anyone and allows his own crew to literally try to kill him without retribution. I'm not kidding. There are these two characters called the Slain Brothers whose sole goal in the book is to be the asshole characters. And the amount of stuff that Wes lets them get away with is shocking. Like, they almost get the crew caught by the military for their own reckless stunt, which includes looting and mindless vandalism. They assault Nat are implied to have been considering going down a much darker route that's best saved for a trigger warning discussion at one point, for which Wes catches them in the act of. And let's not forget, one of the brothers literally tries to leave Wes to die with conscious effort, and he does nothing to them. In fact, Wes still basically pulls them close and tears up, saying, "But they're my crew. I can't let anything happen," whenever they're in danger. I mean, it's like, loyalty only goes so far, dude. That this isn't loyalty, this is idiocy. But I think one of the best examples of just how contradictory what we're told he is and what he actually is comes to when his entire crew are cornered by slavers. And everyone outright tells him they would rather be dead than slaves, with Shakes, his best friend and second in command, making him swear that if it looks like they're going to be taken, Wes will kill him, because he'd rather die than be a slave. We see them get ready. We see them arm their turret. We see them arm themselves with whatever weapons they can find and wait for the slavers to board, only for Wes to literally pussy out the second he realizes there's a lot of slavers, and he decides, let's all be captured, cut with a knife to be marked as slaves, and then separated to unknown fates where he can't control anything. It's awful. But these, it goes so against everything Wes is claimed to be. The other characters aren't much better. Nat is boring and is basically filled to the brim with that ebony darkness dementia Ravenway energy. Shake starts off as the most promising character, but basically suffers from a lack of screen time mostly in the beginning, and then it gets completely dumped later the moment someone is around for him to make googly eyes at. And any character past them are basically not even characters. I honestly forget that a character named Farouk existed at points, which sucks, because he provides one of the assholes that the story becomes notorious for the more you read. But yeah, let's move on to that issue. Let's talk about the confusion of just what kind of story that this book wants to tell. Like, things come just right the hell out of nowhere, just to solve problems. Literally, there are so many things in this book that just happened that I could not remember being alluded to or hinted at in any way. Like, Nat has a vague memory of Wes somewhere, but Wes has no memory of her. What could it be? Well, obviously, it's because Nat, who used to be a military agent where they would regularly mind wipe their soldiers for some reason. It doesn't make sense why or even how they mind wipe them, so please don't ask. But she went after Wes's twin, Eliza, because she was one of these special marked too, and was the reason Eliza died. Only no, she wasn't. Eliza and Wes staged the whole event that Nat is beating herself up over to convince the government agents that Eliza is dead, but also somehow Wes lost track of Eliza during that event and has been searching for her ever since. So now, not only do we have a completely guilt-free romance, but now we also know that Wes's sister is truly alive. And it means absolutely nothing then, because this whole build-up means nothing. This whole guilt means nothing. It doesn't even make sense when you think back on it. So, what about the time that Nas and Wes are being held prisoner by slavers and are barely being fed at all in an attempt to hope starvation will break their will? Well, guess what? It just so happened that Wes has bacon fruit. Looks like bacon, tastes like fruit. And apparently, he was using it as jacket insulation until this moment. And it was good insulation, but it's also good to eat and never mentioned at anywhere in the story up until this point anyways. But also, ethereal butterflies show up at one point to bring them a bunch of seeds and nuts to eat when they're out of bacon fruit, even when they're in the middle of the ocean. What about that time Nat and Wes lead a prison riot to escape? Except, oh no, it turns out they didn't think about the fact that they need a ship to get off the slaver ship, and are about to be recaptured. Oh, but what luck. Shakes and a pair of small men lovers and Farouk, who literally abandoned them in the middle of the night, arrive on their old ship, which I guess was just left behind where they were captured, after they led their own successful prison riot. Because as it turns out, Farouk was forced to abandon the crew earlier, and was captured by slavers shortly afterwards, and his nautical experience caused the slavers to release him from the cage and make them one of his own, leaving him in the perfect spot to spring Shakes and their small men in their own riot. One of the slavers who captured Wes and Nat has shown unhealthy interest in Nat and has promised to do awful things. Oh no. Except, we're almost a month into the captivity and he hasn't done anything yet? Oh, wait a minute, I guess it's because Nat, off-screen and never once alluded to, that until it was needed, traded the Anaximander's map to this man, so named the Slob, in exchange for being left alone. Which also leads to the evil military finding the blue and attacking it with naval ships. Which of course leads to the final ass pull that apparently Nat is actually an all-powerful dragon rider who's the last offender of the blue, which is actually a piece of a fantastical realm which is currently smashed into the dimension, and the two which have merged in the past, which is why both Alexander and Avalon are in our mythology, by the way, are threatening to overwhelm each other, and that's what's causing the Ice Age somehow. It's just pull after pull after pull. It honestly gets frustrating. And this isn't even talking about the 3 fake-out deaths we get, where they only survive due to the power of love. I honestly mean each time that these deaths happen, we literally get them grieving for a page. A specific comment from a character assuring us that they've checked like a pulse, or checked their breathing, or checked their heart, to make sure it was still beating, and it isn't, and then we see their lifeless corpse for about a minimum of several minutes in universe, at one point even days in book time, only for them to randomly, I'm alright! Because who wants actual stakes in the book? Am I right? And that's not even going into the many objective errors in this book. The first 50 pages of this book are just constant, unsubtle, and forced exposition that goes on so long that it starts to grind on your nerves. It's actually to the point where the authors create plot holes just so they can exposit some more. For example, a minor one, this line. Okay, so first of all, if firearms training is standard practice among the RSA, which is creatively stands for the remaining states of America, why would Wes ask in the first place? He would just assume that she would know how to use the gun. But this opens up a plot hole because Nat was raised in the RSA, was kidnapped by military forces, and used as a military asset as a literal special operations soldier, to the point that the reason she knows Wes is from a past on this former military mission. So how does she not know how to use a gun? And honestly, just the writing in general is atrocious in just about every way you can imagine. Grammar, syntax, you name it. In fact, it's so bad, I brought in an English major to talk about how awful it is. It's one you've met before. Welcome back to the channel, Rukari. Take it away.
I'm going to preface all of this with, hi, I'm an English major, and I am very passionate about this subject. Okay, I'm not even going into this with a script or anything. I just want you all to experience my raw, unfiltered emotions trying to read through the excerpts I've been given of this book, because, oh my god, this writing, a middle schooler could come up with better grammatical structure than what this guy is putting out. Let's start with one of my favorites. Because one of these sentences that I'm reading here is just, and they were kissing and kissing and kissing, and his mouth was on hers, and there is so little description in what is happening there. Like, if you want to create some emphasis by a repetition, use different words. They were kissing, and his tongue was on hers, and their hands were running up and down, and he could smell her. There's so much you can pack into that. Beyond those, and kissing and kissing and kissing, me, I'm in middle school. And another thing, what is the obsession with hyphens and commas? Like, are we reading an Anne Radcliffe novel? Are you trying to purple this prose? Because all it's coming out is as a pale mauve hue. Like, There, like, what are the other lines? There was nothing across the line, dash dash. That's what the government said, dash dash. What they wanted you to believe, comma, anyway. Make that separate sentences. There was nothing across the line. That's what the government said, or what they wanted you to believe. Just make it punchy. Why are these sentences so long? Wes carried one because he had to, but he'd never killed anyone with it. He threatened many, of course. He'd waved it around and shot drones and trucks and who knew what else, but his hands were clean and so were his boys. That is one entire sentence with like 6 commas in it. And by the by, if you're shooting trucks, I guarantee you at some point you're going to have shot someone. I don't even know what the context is of his hands being clean in this war. But it's so pretentious sounding. Here's another one. Again, all one sentence. He smiled, and she smiled back, and for a moment they were just an ordinary boy and girl in a car. Neither runner and client, or mercenary and thief, and Nat saw a glimpse of how normal things could be. I understand that a lot of English classes, like, you need parentheticals and subclauses, and you need long sentences and short sentences, but the point of having long sentences and short sentences is to be able to describe things in depth so that you're getting a more complete picture of what's going on. The banality of just having a string of comparisons of them smiling at each other and what they could be, it gives me nothing. Absolutely nothing. There is no information in that other than there's a boy and a girl and they're smiling at each other. The rest of the sentence gives you nothing. You could just have, he smiled and she smiled back, and for a moment they were just an ordinary boy and girl in a car, and you would get the same information in half the sentence length. And this is not to say that you can't extend this sentence and include more relevant information. It is to say that the information that the author is giving us doesn't evolve the sentence, doesn't evolve the story, and it doesn't evolve our understanding of the characters. You could absolutely include more information here as either another sentence or more parentheticals, but you need to tell us something about the characters, because the things that you're telling us they're not are things we already know. We know that they're a runner and a client and a mercenary and a thief. But we don't know what they want. You could tell us how Nat is picturing a different life where they could have just been on a road trip, or where they're friends. Because if you're giving us an insight into the character's thoughts, then we're starting to understand more about them and how they work. They're not just a set piece, they're a living, thinking entity on the page. And all this is more of a writing style criticism than an actual grammatical criticism. Because for grammatical criticisms, I can just turn to poor word choice and stuff like that. Another example. Even though there was no physical barrier that kept the city from the borderlands, the fence was as real as the invisible electric volts that killed anyone who breached it. Now here's the thing. An electric fence is still a physical barrier because it's a force that is preventing you from leaving a place. Something that is not a physical barrier is a mental barrier. It is the defining line that someone is telling you you can't cross. Electric fences are very real, very capable of harming you, and very capable of preventing you from leaving. I'm aware that this is a little nitpicky, but it would make much more sense to say that even though there was no visible barrier that kept the city from the borderlands, the fence was as real as the electric volts that killed anyone who breached it. Because then what you're telling me is that, okay, the way this city is set up, there is a perimeter, and it's the kind of perimeter that's meant to be hidden. But if you really want to grind my gears, let's talk about text. Because apparently we have devolved so much that we don't even use real words. You just use emojis and word salad, letter, keyboard smash to try and describe things. Like there's a book titled XCLNT Heart Lulls, which excellent, love, laugh, live, love, laugh, something, I don't know. Furthermore, how do you have a book an entire book written in what is essentially the kind of keyboard texting we used on flip phones because we had a character limit and the T9 keyboard system required you to drop every second letter if you actually wanted to type with any level of speed. How have we regressed this far? Honestly, I could almost believe it more if you had picture books entirely written out of emojis, because at least that kind of resembles what we've devolved to today with the amount of emojis I see in like TikTok and on YouTube Shorts in Gen Z conversations. That is almost more understandable than a book written in T9 chat speak. I'm gonna stop with the whole text list thing because I don't want to go on for too long, but trust me, there are so many more complaints I could make about this book in the number of hyphens and commas and parentheticals and run-on sentences, and it hurts to read. It hurts as much as reading Gothic literature did in 12th grade English. Just don't.
So yeah, in the end, 4 out of 10. So, yeah, I'm not sure what else to say about this book. It's badly written. It's one of those books that you won't hate it when you first read it, but when you stop and think back on the book, you just find so much wrong with it that what you thought was like maybe a 6 out of 10 just keeps going down and down and down and down as you realize that the authors, it felt like they didn't even try on this book. It felt like they were hoping purely that their pandering nature would bring in the audience that they need and not any good written book. Now, obviously, I'm not accusing them of this, and based on the bibliography, they've written some very well-renowned books before. It's just in this specific case, it feels like they said, hey, I want to write a young adult book, but I don't want to put that much effort into it, so here you go. Like, the biggest effort I say to that is Textlish. Like, anyone with half a brain would know Textlish would just not work. And in the end, the question of whether or not it deserves Mount Doom is yes. Because, I mean, I really don't know who to recommend it for. It might be fine if this is like your first ever YA dystopian book. But even then, I have so many other YA dystopian books I would recommend way over this one. In fact, I would recommend The Arctic Code, a children's novel, over this book. Because it at least realizes its setting and realizes its characters way better than this book does. This book is legitimately hoping to just pry on the pandering, or to just, like, it hopes you won't think about anything. It's so confused on what it wants to be that it isn't anything. With that being said, just remember, with every book comes an adventure, and every adventure is worth having, even the bad ones. See you later, everyone.